All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission American Eel Board. I'm calling this meeting to order. I'm Chris Kuhn, the administrative proxy for Pennsylvania and current chair of the American Eel Management Board. This will be my last meeting as chair, and our vice chair, Jesse Hornstein from New York, will be taking over at the next board meeting. The technical committee chair remains vacant. Our advisory panel chair is Mitch Feinbaum from Pennsylvania, and our law enforcement committee representative here to my left is Rob Beal from Maine. I'm joined at the front table by Caitlin Starks of the commission, and we have a half an hour to consider 2 agenda items, as well as hear public comments and consider any new business if there is any. So let's go ahead and get started. But before we do, we have a message from Tony.
I just want to let the board know that Rick is online for Fish and Wildlife Service.
All right, thanks for that, Tony. So to begin this morning's meeting, rather, I'm already getting ahead of myself. Is first the consent item, approval of the agenda. Are there any proposed modifications to the agenda? All right, seeing none. Do we have any hands online? No. The agenda is approved by consent. In the next consent item is approval of the proceedings from the August 2025 American Eel Management Board. Are there any edits to the proceedings from the August board meeting? Not seeing any here in the room. Any hands online? Not seeing any. The August 2025 proceedings are approved by consent. Moving on to public comments. Are there any members of the public, either here or online, that would like to make comments pertaining to items that are not on today's agenda? All right, not seeing any, and there's no hands online, so we'll go ahead and jump right in. Moving to item number 4 on the agenda, which is to consider approval of the Fisheries Management Plan review and state compliance for the 2024 fishing year. Caitlin Starks is going to lead us off with a presentation. Caitlin, we're ready for your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll go over the American Eel FMP review for the 2024 fishing year. I'll start with the status of the FMP, then the status of the stock, status of the fishery, compliance review, and the plan review team's recommendations, as well as de minimis requests. So to start, these are the FMP and addenda provisions that apply to all states with eel fisheries. All states are required to implement a young of year survey and maintain regulations as strict or stricter than what was in place before the FMP was implemented. The FMP and addenda also require trip level CPUE data reporting, allow for developing a sustainable fishery management plan in order to deviate from the fishery management plan requirements, and also provide an aquaculture allowance of 200 pounds of glass eel per state with board approval. For any alternative fishery management plan, the state must scientifically demonstrate it will not increase the overall fishing mortality. For glass eel fisheries, the FMP includes a maximum tolerance of 25 pigmented eel per pound of glass eel harvest. It establishes Maine's glass eel quota, which has been 9,688 pounds since 2015. And it requires daily trip level reporting. And Maine does this through their electronic monitoring program, which allows them to track landings from harvesters to dealers and to export. And Maine is also required to collect data from a life cycle survey for all life stages. And then Addendum 6 was approved in May, and this maintained the Maine glass eel quota, but there have been no other changes to the FMP requirements for glass eel. For yellow eel, the FMP requires a minimum size of 9 inches and a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch minimum mesh size on eel pots. Addendum 3 required a recreational bag limit of 25 eels per day with an allowance of 50 fish per day for hire captains and crew. Addendum 4 established the coast-wide commercial harvest cap for yellow eel, which was updated by Addendum 5, and also established the 10% overage trigger for management. And I just want to note here that the commercial harvest cap will decrease to 518,821 pounds starting in 2025 under Addendum 7. For silver eel, the FMP established a closure from September 1st through December 31st, during which no eel take is allowed except for from baited traps or pots and spears. And the Delaware River was granted an exemption from this requirement, but it's restricted to only 9 permits. And there have been no other changes recently to these requirements. Maine is currently the only state with an aquaculture plan, and the first year of that was 2019. And in 2024, 200 pounds were harvested for aquaculture in Maine, and Maine has submitted proposals for 2025 and 2026, which were approved for 200 pounds of glass eel, and they continue to allocate that to American unagi. Stock status for eel is based on the benchmark stock assessment that was peer reviewed in 2022 and accepted for management in 2023. And the assessment concluded the stock remains depleted or at or near historically low levels due to a range of factors. It also noted that the yellow eel abundance has continued to decline since the last stock assessment, and it does not provide an overfishing or overfish status for eel. The board responded to the assessment results through Addendum 7, which lowered that coastwide cap for yellow eel. So this graph shows the abundance index from the benchmark assessment for yellow eel with the upper and lower 95% confidence intervals. And these are the annual landings estimates dating back to 1950 for eel. The coastwide cap is shown by the dashed blue line starting in 2013 when it was established through 2024. And next year we will see that decrease in the cap from Addendum 7. Commercial landings in the FMP review are from state compliance reports, and so they're still considered preliminary, but for 2024, the coastwide yellow eel landings were about 284,000 pounds, which is a 3.8% decrease from 2023, and that is 31% of the current coastwide harvest cap. Landings from Maryland make up 70% of that harvest, and the next highest harvests come from New Jersey with 11% and New York with 6%, together accounting for 87% of the coastwide total. For glass eel, Maine harvested 9,634 pounds of glass eels in 2024, and South Carolina also has a glass eel fishery, but their harvest is confidential. The PRT reviewed the state compliance reports, and they found no issues with implementation of the glass eel requirements. Regarding yellow eel provisions, the PRT noted that New York has now implemented regulations for minimum mesh size that are consistent with the requirements of Addendum 3, resolving the issue that was raised last year. And for silver eel, the PRT continued to note 2 minor issues that have been addressed in previous years' reports, which are that Delaware and Florida have not implemented regulations preventing the harvest of eels from pound nets from September 1st through December 31st. But neither state is aware of any active pound net fishery. And then the PRT noted 1 issue with regard to reporting, which is that in the compliance report this year, Rhode Island did not provide the CPUE for harvest, commercial harvest, harvest by life stage, or harvest by gear type, which are required under Addendum 3. And then as of Addendum 7, to qualify for de minimis status for eel, a state's average landings for the preceding 3 years must be under 1% for a particular life stage. So the de minimis requests this year are from New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, DC, and Georgia, and they all qualify for de minimis status for yellow eel. And the PRT recommends the board approve these de minimis requests. And then additional recommendations from the PRT are that the board should reevaluate the requirement that the states provide estimates on the percent of harvest that goes to food versus bait, as noted in previous years, just given this information is not currently used. And the PRT continues to recommend the Commission and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service work together to annually compare the domestic landings data to export data for American eel across all life stages. And that wraps up the FMP review. So the board action for consideration is to approve the FMP review for the 2024 fishing year for eel, state compliance reports, and de minimis status requests. I can take any questions.
Are there any questions for Caitlin? Any hands online? I'm assuming there's no board discussion. If there is any, let's entertain it now. All right, do we have anyone prepared to make a motion? Heather Corbett. Second. Steve Train.
Move to approve American Eel FMP review for the 2024 fishing year, state compliance reports and de minimis status for Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, District of Columbia, and Georgia for yellow eel.
Okay, apparently I'm really trying to stick to our 30 minutes and go right past reading the motion into the record. So now I'll take a second. Steve Train. Steve, any comments? Nope. All right, let's go ahead and try and do this the easy way. Is there any opposition to the motion? All right, seeing none, the motion passes by consent. So moving on to item number 5, which is to consider Florida's proposal to discontinue American eel young a year sampling. And for that, I'll turn it over to Erica Burgess, who's going to provide us with an overview of the proposal. Erica, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will be brief, as brief as I can for the sake of the time of the meeting, and I'm happy to elaborate on anything if there are questions. Next slide, please. So, as Caitlin just reviewed, the FMP requires states to conduct annual young of year sampling, and there was a change to that requirement in Addendum 7, but that was only to remove length and pigment survey requirements. Florida is requesting that the board consider an exemption to our state for the glass seal survey, and I'll present why. Next slide. So we have limited eel young of year sampling locations in our state based on the nature of our close coastline and lack of restriction areas or choke points for eels. In the last 2 decades, we've identified only one location in our entire state where we can possibly get glass eels. That's at the Guana River Dam, which was put in place for a waterfowl impoundment just north of St. Augustine, Florida. All other locations in our state, the eels have grown past the glass eel stage by the time they reach that. We've determined that passive gear does not effectively sample glass eels, and we have instead looked into and are funding and doing other eel sampling for other life stages doing various methods. Next slide. When FWC chose to stop doing the glass eel surveys directly, we contracted the University of North Florida to do the annual sampling. In that time period, catches have declined to less than 20 individuals per year. That brings the cost for each individual sample to over $700. We have, as an agency, decided not to renew that contract with the University of North Florida and reallocated those funds to other American eel research in our state to collect information on age and growth, parasites, and yellow eel movement. Next slide. So we are requesting that the board consider an exemption, but not straight out today. I'll offer a motion instead to ask the TC to evaluate Florida's request and to provide the board their determination on the utility of Florida's glass seal survey before the board makes a final decision on that. We will, in the meantime, continue to survey other eel life stages in Florida using those funds to support eel research. The University of North Florida has let us know that they'd like to voluntarily continue some sampling, but it's not guaranteed and it won't happen at the levels that happened previously. They will be seeking funds elsewhere to do that research at the university. And that wraps me up. So I'll pause for questions.
Any questions for Erica? John Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Erica. Just curious, when you say Florida is a huge state, and I'm just wondering how that could be the only spot to sample glass eels when we've seen in recent years there's been a huge amount of glass eel smuggling coming out of the Dominican Republic, other spots in the Caribbean. Is it something where you can say that Florida has looked for other spots and just not found any place? It's just a matter of access?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Kim Von Vecchio has been the lead on our eel research with the Fish and Wildlife Research Institute. She served on the technical committee for 20 years. She has thoroughly investigated the entire state looking for points, and because we don't have much barriers to fish passage, there's not a good single point site to collect glass eels.
If I could just follow up for a second. So I'm just curious because, you know, as I said, it's a big area. Have you seen, is it anything to do with the currents there? Or I'm just wondering how they could get so many of them in the Caribbean and yet they're not going into Florida at that point.
I'm not an expert on the Caribbean, so I can't answer that, John.
All right, are there any more questions for Erica? Any discussion on her presentation? All right, so I think I heard Erica, you're ready to make a motion? Could you read that into the record?
Yes, I'd like to move to direct the American Eel Technical Committee to evaluate the utility of continuing the Florida Glass Eel Survey and its contribution to the Commission's management and assessment of the American eel stock, and report back to the Commission at the next American Eel Management Board meeting so that the board can consider exempting Florida from the Glass Eel Survey compliance requirement.
Second by Doug Hamans. Doug, would you like to provide any further rationale?
No, I just supporting Florida's motion, having lived there for a number of years. I understand their issue and I'm willing to support it.
All right, is there any discussion on the motion? John Clark.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I certainly understand Florida's situation there. I was on the technical committee years ago with Kim, and I know the effort she put into find glass eels there. As we know, going back to when this requirement went into the FMP back in, what was it, 1999, many states have wanted to get exempted from the glass eel sampling. So before we go down this route, if we are to approve a motion like this, I'd like to add to it, or I think we should add to it as a board, some requirement that Florida, you know, as Erica said, Florida has said they will continue these other yellow eel sampling programs, but I think it needs to be actually put into writing that that is part of their requirement is to continue the other. So I'm just curious as to whether Florida would accept the motion to be amended to require some of the other sampling they said they would do.
Caitlin, you have a question?
I guess I just want to clarify Mr. Clark's intention here. So would your preference to be to amend this motion or to have the technical committee report back on this? And then if the board considers exempting Florida based on that technical committee guidance, make sure in that motion, it would include a requirement to continue alternative sampling.
Right. Sorry. Yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself here because this is simply to have the TC look at that. I would say that at that point, just to put it on the record, that I would just like to see if the board would, you know, I think maybe we don't need a motion to do so, but just that the board acknowledge that Florida will be required to do some eel sampling if the TC says the glass eel sampling can be discontinued. Thanks.
Saw another hand, Matt Gates.
Yeah, thanks, Erica. Thanks for that presentation. I'll support the motion on the board. I think this is the right way to proceed with a request to discontinue monitoring, is to have the scientific community evaluate it. So thanks, nice job.
Is there any other further discussion on the motion? All right, this time I'll go to the public to see if there's any comments on the motion.
My hand is up. Mitch Feigenbaum.
Yes, Mitch. I just.
Hi there.
Your hand
Yeah,
was up?
yes,
Or-
thank you. Thanks, Erica, for the presentation, and my compliments also to Kim Bonvecchio, who I know has been working hard for 2 decades on eel science in Florida. And I know the motion wouldn't have been made, or this request wouldn't be made, unless she really was unable to find suitable locations. My main comment is that I would appreciate if the technical committee could communicate with the advisory panel for input before making any final recommendations to the board. The AP had serious discussion about the issue about the continuance of YOY surveys when at the last addendum, I believe there was even a recommendation by the TC to scale back or eliminate the YOY surveys altogether, and the AP had strong feelings about that. But we do understand that if you can't find the glass eels, it's pretty hard to do a survey. I did want to very quickly comment. It's my understanding that some state young of year surveys are not geared towards glass eels, or at least in the past, some of the YOY surveys were actually targeting year one pigmented fingerlings. And I do wonder if that would be a possibility for Florida to think about. And finally, I just want to remind the commissioners that years ago, Wilson Laney of the Fish and Wildlife Service, when eel stock concerns were really a hot issue at ASMFC, he and others, worked together to make proposals suggesting that rather than having statewide YOY surveys going forward, that the board consider the possibility of creating really just 2, 3, or 4, a small handful of coastwide surveys, representative of different regions. And I think that we'd be well served to have 3 or 4 young of year surveys that are really robust, bringing in big numbers, or able to catch good numbers per year, rather than a greater number of surveys that may be of lesser quality. So these are topics we'd be happy to talk to. I know the AP would like to share its thoughts with the AP, and we'll appreciate that opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mitch. So Mitch indicated that he would like the AP to be involved in the review of this proposal. If that is to occur, the board would need to direct the AP to do so. So do we need a motion on that? So is there anybody in opposition? We don't need a motion on it, but is there any opposition to having the AP weigh in on this proposal? All right, seeing none. So we can move to, I believe, a decision point on this proposal. So is there any oppositions to the proposal? All right, seeing none, the motion passes by consent. And so that wraps up our business on the agenda. Is there any other business to come before the American Eel Board today? John Clark.
It's not really I was just wondering if we can get an update on what's going on with the CITES process.
Yes, Caitlin, could you?
So nothing new has happened since our last meeting. The CITES meeting is still scheduled for November, December of this year, at which point they will consider whether to list American eel under CITES Appendix 2, or really any appendix at this point. We do not have an indication from the US on its vote on that, so I can't really provide any additional updates until later on. There was a comment period, if this is part of your interest, on whether or not the.
If I can just interrupt for a second,
Yeah.
Caitlin, just that's part I was curious about.
Okay.
So who votes? How many nations vote on the CITES proposal? This is going to be a big operation.
All of the parties to CITES, but I do not know how many exactly there are. There are only 2 countries that are not parties to CITES, is what Tony is saying. So a lot. I guess I will add that the proposal that was put forward by the EU did include a delay in when the listing would go into effect. So it wouldn't be immediate. It would be, I believe, a 90 or a year, 18 months, I think, was the delay that they had in their proposal. So it wouldn't be, if they did approve the EU's proposal as is, it wouldn't be until 2027 that it would go into place.
I'm going to go online to Mitch Feigenbaum.
Yeah, I see the time. I'll be real quick. I just wanted to share on this topic. Caitlin's being a little bit modest. Since the last ASMFC meeting, the Fish and Wildlife Service actually had a public session to take comment on the CITES proposal. And as good fortune would have it, Caitlin was the first person in DC to put her name on the list to speak that day, and I was second. So although the input session was geared to multiple species of flora and fauna that are being proposed for CITES listing, in fact, the first 10 or 15 minutes of public comment from Caitlin and I were devoted singularly to the question of eel populations, and we definitely had the attention of the new Fish and Wildlife Service director, as well as his two chiefs that were accompanying him at that meeting. And I definitely feel that Caitlin did a great job conveying the views of the commission. And I was glad to be there to hear that and to offer some views myself. But we really, I feel, did a great job educating the service in a short period of time about the importance of this issue. So well done, Caitlin.
All right, thanks for that update, Mitch, and appreciate Caitlin's and Mitch's participation in the comment period. Back to John Clark. One more comment.
If I could just make another real brief question. I just wondered if Maine could give us an update on the American Unagi bankruptcy and how that will affect the aquaculture plan going forward.
I don't have any information to share, John. I probably know just as much as you do from the news. Sorry.
All right, so I think that wraps up the business of the American Eel Management Board here this morning. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Doug Grout. Second? Ray Kane. Oh. Okay, Okay, so we're not quite adjourned yet. I was just made aware that we have a hand online that may speak to John Clark's question. Sarah Rademacher.
Hey, I don't know if can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Sarah Rademacher with American Unagi. Just an update as far as American Unagi. We're proceeding with a sale of the company and the business is continuing operations. So I expect to, under new ownership, that applications under the company will continue for the aquaculture quota. So.
All right, thank you, Sarah. So we had a motion to adjourn in a second. So this meeting is now adjourned.